Hello, good morning, good evening. It's a pleasure for me, and thanks a lot for the invitation. I have to say, it's new for me. It's the first time that I do an online conference like that, making a presentation. So please, how to say, accept probably some difficulties from my side. I want to say thanks also on behalf of CESAR to speak about this white paper, which was launched last year in June about next generation metrics. And you see already on the first slide a couple of names, and that are all the persons who were very much involved in preparing this white paper. There were a lot more people, but I will go into detail in my presentation. So I hope it will be a very practical presentation. So I don't want to be very theoretical, and I want to lead you through the content of this paper. So next slide, please. Could I have the next slide? Is it possible to change to the next slide, please? Because I have not, yeah, thanks a lot. Yeah, I guess not everybody is familiar with CESAR, so I want to give some small information about CESAR, who it is, what it stands for. So it's the Conference of European Schools for Advanced Engineering, Education and Research. What does it mean? It's an organization putting members together or universities with science and technology background, with engineering and natural science background. It was founded in 1990, so it's already 30 years old as a non-profit association, and is hosted at the University of Leuven in Belgium. At the moment, it unites over 50, I counted it as 52 members in this members University of Science and Technologies from Europe, but also beyond. So there is even a university from Russia, Tomsk member, and then also the one member from Turkey and one member from Israel. But what it is an acknowledged stakeholder, acknowledged by the European Parliament, constant discussing new activities concerning this kind of universities. It was, for instance, as that is something very recent, founder of the European Open Science Cloud Association, and so on. Well, as I said, universities from 26 countries. I checked out for the UK, so that are the universities for Sheffield, Strathclyde, and Surrey. Hope that was the right pronunciation. And Austria, as I'm myself, as said before, working at TU Wien. There is TU Wien and TU Graz participating in CESAR. It educates over 1 million students in total. By now it's 1.1 million students, and there are almost 90,000 employees, academic staff-wise, involved. Most of the members are also ranked in the typical ranks, DHA and QS. So I guess it's a quite impressive organization and doing together. Next slide, please. Yeah, how is it organized? It has a president who is changing, of course, all the time. So at the moment, it's Mr. Rick van der Walle, who is the rector from the University of Ghent, and two vice presidents. One is from Ireland, one from Romania. A secretary is, of course, established doing the practical work. It's David Bauer as a secretary general, as a general assembly board of directors, as typical in such kind of institutions. What is important for the members are the task forces and work groups, because that is where the members meet together. They are really essential for inventorizing which kind of problems, which challenges are to be tackled. And that give us a lot of opportunities to learn from each other. At the moment, there are 8 task forces. You see, they are really in different areas, from infrastructure, human resources, open science, and the task force benchmark, which is important for the white paper and other working groups. Next slide, please. So about the task force benchmark. This task force was established in 2012. And what are the objectives? Of course, everything regarding rankings and metrics. And here, establishing contacts to the rankers, giving information to the members how to work with metrics and rankings, best practices, experiences. That is all what has been done since now almost 8 years. The chairman is Mats Nygaard. He's the dean of engineering education at the Norwegian Technical University in Trondheim. And there are 50 senior experts at the moment. And what is also very important, there is a working group on, it's called annual member monitoring, as all the members have their figures and which are put together. And that is be led by Rona Smith, who is the Director of Strategy and Policy at the University of Strathclyde. And of course, this working group and the task force are working very strong together. The main activities, as I said, is of course this constant feedback and discussion with the rankers, but the white paper on next generation metrics, which was, as I said, released last year in June 2020. So next slide. So what is the structure and the basic idea of this white paper? There was really a long discussion over a period, probably more than 3 years. I have to say I joined the task force about 2 years ago. Then they were in the middle of the discussion. And the structure at the end of the day was 5 chapters, as definition, methodology, of course, and then a set of metrics. And they were divided in the typical pillars, which are typical for a university. It's science, it's education, and it's innovation. So one chapter dealing with science metrics, one chapter dealing with education metrics, one with innovation metrics. And then there was also the idea of thinking about progressive metrics, which are probably really in the future, relevant in the future, and it's also one chapter about that. It has 2 annexes, and in these annexes you find I think, most important, or the heart of this paper. It's the list of the proposed metrics. Let's go to the next slide. So, of course, when collecting these metrics, we thought it's very important that they are smart. So what does it mean? Specific means they should be unique. They should be it should be clear what should be measured. They should be measurable. So it should be also clear in its understanding for everybody who works with it, what is going to be measured. Accepted by the persons who are doing this job, who are working with the metrics. Realistic means that they are not something overwhelming, so that you can find enough proven data in databases or other sources. So realistic. Time limited means that of course you can measure during a clear time interval, so that you can compare the development, for instance, of a specific metric. And of course, even though all this, the members of CESEAR are working in the engineering and natural science area, there are huge differences between these universities. according to size, according to cultural background, countries, systems, different system. And we were thinking about metrics which are applicable for all these kind of universities. We also don't think that the white papers would be descriptive or prescriptive. If the members should take out what they can need, what they can work with, they can add something. It should be an inspiration for the institutions, and it should be possible that you're getting information, especially for the university rectors or other sources. So next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yeah. So what was the group working with the metrics collection? As I said before, the lead or the brains behind were in fact Mats Nygaard and Per-Erik Thörnström. Per-Erik Thörnström, he retired now, and he was working at the Chalmers University of Technology in Gothenburg. And as I said, Mats Nygaard is from the Norwegian University of Technology at Trondheim. Me and Alexandra Czarnicka, she's from the TU Delft. We were working together with the set of 30 metrics. And David Baumert, the CESAER General Secretary, he was working with the progressive matrix together with Mats and Per-Erik. And of course, the other members of the task force were doing a lot of input and discussion behind. So that were the people behind. So if we go to the next slide. Yeah, so now we come to the heart of the white paper. As I said, we identified, or we discussed a lot and finally set up the idea that we should have 10 indicators in the area of science, 10 indicators in the area of education, and 10 innovation indicators in the area of innovation, which is in itself an important issue of a university. And the idea was to give a really a simple table describing these metrics, to give more information what should be measured, the source where you get this kind of information, the category. We have defined 4 categories: output, input, process, impact, but it's probably not so important thing. But what is important, the rationale, the aim of the indicator. So that was that should be clearly defined to make it easy to work with. So that was the set of the 30 indicators. The progressive metrics, which were more looking in the future and even more undefined, were discussed a lot. And at the end of the day, they set specific areas which are of interest. So the knowledge as a global public good, culture and quality, risk-taking and trust, and now I can contribution to sustainability, as this one is one of the most important things which are now going to be discussed in the future. Sustainability is everywhere in discussion. So that are the progressive metrics. They are also put in the Annex 2 in an Excel file, in fact, at the end of the day. So next slide. Let's go to the indicators, these 30 indicators. The first one are the science indicators, 10 science indicators. And of course, The main focus is on publications. That's only clear. Publishing of scientific publications, but also everything concerning research data, fair data. That's a big issue now. Also the fact how to store data and on the open repositories, and also the involvement of citizens in as a feedback mechanism in research, and in addition the feedback for research activities coming from international postdocs and students. So putting this together at the end of the day, so next slide. Next slide, please. We have this list of the science indicators. So you see the first 5 science indicators, they deal with publications. Some of them are quite, it's not something new. It's something which is probably used already a lot. If I start with open access publications, that is quite easy to find in Web of Science, Scopus. Nevertheless, then top 10% most cited publications and the citation impact, that are indicators which are have to be normalized. And also the fact of interdisciplinary publications. There it's of course a question of definition and of source, but the multi-rank gives here obviously a source for this kind of publications. Then we have publications with non-academic sector, so the share of publications that have at least one co-author from the non-academic sector, that could be of interest if there is a development concerning that. And then we come to the other points with which I mentioned. So international PhD students and postdocs share of that. Repository traffic that could be of interest, because most of the universities have an institutional repository by now. Then everything research data management, open and fair data sets, share of publications that have a research data sets for which the data set is open and fair. The definitions are also in the white paper. Citizen science projects. As I said before, that should be the interlink with the public, with the common public. And then probably also of interest, open science trainings, which have been organized at the university. So the idea is that you could take the metrics or indicators which you want, and you can follow also over a certain time period the development at your specific institution. And so the indicator should not only be to compare universities, but it should be also that a university can follow this track and see if there is a change in the outcome at the end of the day. So that are the science indicators. The next slide. Then the education indicators. 10 education indicators. And of course, the goal or the idea behind is lifelong learning, equal access to all kind and affordable to education. Then also the question or the idea that which kind of skills do all graduates or should graduates have by now when leaving a university, and also the eliminate any disparities, gender disparities or the other kind of disparities. And the 10 indicators which were identified are on the next slide. So one of them are quite basic again. It's, for instance, graduation rate. That is something what you normally, you do it all the time, or especially if you work with the ministry, etc., you have to give this kind of information. The employment rate of graduates, that's probably also something which is quite sometimes difficult also to find out, but it should be the rate of employment of bachelor or master level graduates after a certain period, for instance, 18 months or 1 year. As an indication how efficient the education has been. Then alternative student recruitment, which might be also of interest, percentage of students entering higher education through an alternative route. Then international experience. Share of bachelor and master graduates with international experience during their studies. That means that a student, a bachelor or a master student, has to be at least, for instance, 3 months somewhere abroad doing research or making experience in a specific field. That same in the same line, internship experience. That means the share of bachelor or master graduates making an internship of at least 3 months in a non-academic organization. That is probably an interesting indication how down to earth this education is. Digital skills, that's also a very important issue at the moment. So share of bachelor and master graduates having completed training in digital skills for of about, let's say, 30 ECTS, and also other core professional skills. So you could also measure that. And another point may be open educational resources. So free ebooks, software or whatsoever, so you could measure that. Then open online courses, MOOCs, etc. So I guess in times like at the moment, of course, that has had an enormous boost. But it's interesting how it will go on in the future when hopefully everything will go to normal again. And at the end, lifelong learning, that means how share of educational income from this kind of offered education. So that are the education indicators. So you find always, as I said before, with the definition and the aim, more information in the Annex 1 of the white paper. So the next slide. Then the innovation indicators. Innovation, of course, is the heart of any university or research institution. In terms, it means it's very much the collaboration with the outer world, with the industry, exchanging stuff, opportunities, disseminating new findings, licenses, patents, everything concerning this interaction between the university and the industry and the outer world, which improves also probably these skills, entrepreneurial skills, etc. So the indicators we have found are in the next slide. So that are the granted patents. That's also a very common indicator. Then I guess a lot of universities have now incubators. So incubators who support specific projects or assist projects for spin-offs, etc. So here, this metric. Then the surviving spin-off companies, that's a question, how many companies, according, for instance, to these incubator activities, have been developed, and are they able to exist at least 3 years after their start, and so on? How is it making the stemming from the university? So that's, I guess, a very important indicator. The number of licenses based on work from the university and sold by the university. Open source software, how much of this kind of software was developed by the university, created by the university, and is now free, available. Concerning industrial collaboration as itself, there is the share of research incoming due to industrial collaboration. That's a very important point anyhow, and will be followed for sure. Also the industrial co-publication, we put it here because it should be very specific on the co-publication with industry. So co-written with at least one author coming from industry. Then publications cited in patents, also quite interesting term. Then industry employed PhD students. Of course, for a university in the engineering area, that's quite common and important, that a specific share of doctoral students are industry employed. And so for our universities, that's an important indicator. And at the end, entrepreneurial skills. So to measure if, to what extent, how many ECTS at the end of the day, bachelor and master graduates have been trained with entrepreneurial skills. So that are the 30 the 30 indicators in science, education, and innovation, which we propose and which we suggest to follow and to use. And now, if you come to the next slide. At the end of the day, there are the progressive metrics, which are even going more in the future, and are reflections about the ongoing discussions of trends in the future. I put here some basics which we took in mind when preparing this white paper. Sustainability theme, for instance, it's everywhere now and on the agenda. And if you go to the next slide. So you see, in brief, that are the themes which, or the topics which were identified as progressive, important in the future. As I said, knowledge is global public good. This everything concerning open, quality of life, service to greater public good and progress. That is also a change, probably in the idea of what a university is standing for. And the rationale behind it, knowledge societies will have to be societies of shared knowledge. So that's why a lot of activities are now going on and might be or should be somehow also made countable in the future. The culture of quality, risk-taking, and trust, yeah, it's also has something to do with trust, risk-taking, and self-responsibility, and should lead to positive, stimulating research environment. So that is this one. And then if we go to the next slide, the contribution to sustainability, as I said, it's now one of the topics. And the idea at the end of the day is, of course, to become the most competitive and dynamic knowledge-based economy in the world, but also capable of sustainable economic growth with more and better jobs and greater social cohesion. So everything which is now somehow in the agenda of these terms. So that are the progressive metrics. If I come now to the final slide, next slide. Here, and I don't want to, I just want to briefly mention our team was really thinking a lot of giving recommendations when changing metric system, etc. And I guess by reading what is standing here, it's self-understanding, you can anticipate what they mean. It's a lot of be careful when changing, consult and reach mutual agreement, does not measure too much, because sometimes measuring too much can also give you the wrong impressions. So take care, metrics at university should be really carefully, especially when it comes to HR policies, etc., carefully used, and caution must be taken. So we are really aware that measuring is one point, but then interpreting is another thing, and slightly move to new agendas and new metrics, which was in this white paper as a basket developed. Yeah, from this point, I say thanks. I hope I could give a small overview about this paper. I feel a bit, as said before, I'm, how to say, I know that most of the people here are from the UK and speak very well English. I hope everybody could understand what I meant. And if there are some questions, I'm of course here to try to answer them. So thank you very much.
That's great. Thank you very much, Ingrid. That was really interesting. I'm going to hand over to my colleague Catherine now, who has been manning the Q&A and chat to collate the questions that have come in and put those to you. Catherine, are you ready to?
I am, yes. How long do we have for questions?
We have quite a long time, nearly 20 minutes.
Okay, fine.
But some of that can be used for a longer break and things like that if we can't fill that time.
No, that's absolutely fine. Thank you very much, Ingrid. So we have had a couple of questions come in. Can I ask the first question, which is, did you consider any qualitative indicators or evidence for next generation evaluations, or just quantitative indicators?
For the qualitative, you mean? I mean, if you go through this list, this 30, you mean these 30 metrics which I presented, yeah? They are countable indicators. So it's, and that was the idea, to have figures behind. So it's not a, it's more quantitative measurement, of course. Yeah, qualitative, it's more than, at the end of the day, as we said, the interpretation, of course, is a specific thing at the end of the day. But in principle, we have 30 quantitative indicators, which gives you figures, which you can follow. Yeah, and the idea is that you, for instance, take one indicator and have a look at what is in the year 2021 and 2022. Is there a change? And you follow this timeline. And the qualitative, I mean, if you go to the set in, if you take the paper, I will send the link, of course, that everybody can go through. In Annex 2, we have this progressive metrics, and they are really very much qualitative. There is nothing, it's more bringing ideas which could be of interest, which kind of things. There is nothing countable at all. So it's strictly, so you have 30 metrics with figures on behind, and this progressive metrics, which is really more, what do you say, qualitative aspect.
Okay, so that's really interesting. So a real basket of metrics, you could say. So that's,
yeah, it's a basket of 30 measurable metrics with really an outcome, something, and then you have these qualitative things in the progressive metrics. Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much. That's great. I have another question. What has the reception been to this work? Do you know of any universities that are seeking to change the way they evaluate based on the CESAR metrics?
So I think that's too early. I mean, of course, we are trying to discuss it internally in the CESEAR family, let's say like that. And I think it will be slowly implemented, and probably one university will do a lot, and most of the others, they will have a look and how to say, are discuss the experience of the others. So it's something which will slowly be implemented, and it's not also that we force somehow. So there is no how to say, idea of forcing the members to do so. So it's suggestion. Mm.
Okay, so time will tell on that one.
Yes, I think so. I think so.
I have a question. Someone's asked if you could move your camera down a bit so they can see your whole face.
Can you? I have my video is on. I mean,
no, that's just come up in the thing.
You have, yeah.
So another question about the talk. As part of the eNorms Research Evaluations Working Group Scope Framework, they seek to probe evaluations for unintended consequences and discriminatory efforts. Did CESAR give any thought yet to how their indicators might be gamed or misused?
That's why at the end of the day, when you take my last slide, there are a lot of how to say input also to use that properly to think over if you're going on the right way. And we are aware we don't want that, especially if it comes to human resources. And we have also, for instance, at TOVN, a lot of discussions about that you don't misuse and let's say the indicators or make a wrong interpretation which is not appropriate at all. That we are aware of that. So that's why the last slide which I showed you was very much, okay, please consider that and that. And yeah. And the thing is also we are, so CESAR and especially, of course, Mats Nygaard, they are a lot in contact with the rankers because that's also an important issue now. There are a lot of things going on. We don't know how that is how to say calculated by the rankers, and it helps us so that we have also these papers and this common understanding now to discuss with the rankers in a better way, let's say like that. The rankers, yeah.
Another question that's come in is, do you think there is merit to encouraging the use of open citation and publication data for citation analysis in the science indicator component? And that will be opposed to relying purely on the Web of Science or Scopus.
I didn't fully understand, I have to say, actually. I'm sorry. Could you repeat?
Yes, sure. So do you think there is merit in encouraging people to use open citation and publication data for doing citation analysis, and that as opposed to relying on the Web of Science or Scopus in relation to the science indicators?
So, I mean, we indicated the sources quite often, Web of Science and Scopus, of course, but there are, you know, there are also new databases, for instance, like Dimensions, and I mean, there is not a, we put as a source those sources which we've thought they are useful and appropriate. And of course, everybody is free if there is another, for instance, dimension was at that stage not so much used. If this source is also, how to say, trustful, then you could also use that. The idea is that you, of course, what you want to measure, that should be measured in a good way. So that must be secured. If you take another database, then and that is secured, then it should be fine. But when you go in this Annex 1, you see always the source which we, how to say, identified at that time period. You have to think that was 2019 to 2020 when we finalized the paper. And of course, a lot of things change, even within 1 year.
Apologies, I realised I completely miscalculated the amount of time that we had for questions. It was nearly 10 minutes, not nearly 20, so you've got about 3 minutes left.
Okay, fine. I will ask them quickly. Okay, is it planned to carry out in the future any study or survey on how these indicators are being used in CESAR universities?
Not yet, but I will take it with me, and I think that's a very good idea.
Okay, and I have one other question that's come up. Well, a question. So things like, for instance, the share of foreign PhD students, I would imagine they would register their affiliation the university where they are pursuing their PhD and not their home country. How would you go around that?
Again. Sorry, because I just see the. Can you repeat again the question? I'm very sorry.
Saying how would someone saying, while I agree with all the proposed indicators, I believe some of them would be hard to estimate. For instance, share of foreign PhD students. If those students are registering their affiliation in a paper of the university where they are studying for their PhD and not their home country, how would that sort of be dealt with?
We know that some of the, of course, some of the indicators are, it's not so easy to follow them. If you go there, you find quite often a source university, and it really depends then how the university is organizing themselves in providing this kind of information. The last sentence, was it with publications? Because it's so quickly disappearing.
Yeah. Yes, they'd register their affiliation for the paper.
Yeah.
Current university where they're studying and not their home country. So
they register their affiliation for the paper. Yeah, studying or not. I mean, if this, we have one indicators which are dealing with how many incoming foreign PhD students are there at the university. That's to be counted. I mean, and I guess universities know that. If it comes to publications, of course, it's difficult, but I think that's how the research group is organizing themselves when doing the publication at the end of the day.
Okay, thank you very much.
That's not something which, yeah.
Okay, thank you. And I'll hand back over to Joshua, but also coming up, not questions, but big thanks to you for your talk today, which has provoked a lot of interest.